Shane van Gisbergen started Saturday night at Richmond outside the top 30. He finished 14th. He actually lost a spot in the championship standings, sliding right onto the cutline in 16th. And somehow, at the very same time, his cushion over the first driver on the outside of the playoffs got bigger. All four of those things are true. All four happened in the same race. And once you understand how, you understand exactly what this NASCAR season has done to one of its most talked about drivers, and why a guy who was hired specifically to win road courses is now spending his Saturday nights white-knuckling it around a 3/4-mile oval in Virginia. To get why that night mattered so much, you have to rewind to who Shane van Gisbergen was supposed to be when he showed up in the Cup Series in the first place. He arrived from Australia as a 3-time Supercars champion, and he didn't ease into NASCAR. He won his very first Cup Series start on the streets of Chicago back in 2023, something no debuting driver had pulled off in over 60 years. From that moment on, his job description was basically written in stone. He was the road course guy. Trackhouse brought him over to dominate the handful of twisty circuits Cup drivers see each year and turn those wins into a playoff berth. That was the deal, and everybody understood it. The stats behind that deal are almost cartoonish. Between 2023 and 2025, van Gisbergen made 12 road course starts and 38 starts everywhere else. On road courses, he won 6 times with an average finish around 7.6 and a driver rating well north of 120. Everywhere else? Average finish of 25.0, driver rating sitting at 50. In plain terms, his road course finishes were roughly 179% better than the series average, and on every other type of track, he was running about 52% worse than average. Nobody in the modern era had ever shown that big a gap between road courses and everything else through their first 12 road races. He was, without exaggeration, the most lopsided driver NASCAR had seen in decades. Think about what that actually meant for Trackhouse as a race team. Every time the schedule rolled onto an oval, they were essentially punting the weekend, banking on the handful of road course dates to carry the whole season's value. It's an unusual way to build a program, but it worked, because the old playoff system was built around exactly that kind of specialist run. Win one of those road courses, lock in a playoff spot, and worry about the ovals later. For 2 full seasons, that math held up perfectly fine. Then the ground shifted under him. On January 12, 2026, NASCAR blew up the elimination-style playoff format it had run for more than a decade. The new system takes the top 16 drivers after a 26-race regular season and sends them into a 10-race postseason. No eliminations along the way, no winner-take-all finale. Whoever has the most points when the season ends is the champion. Simple on paper. But buried in that simplicity was the one change that hit van Gisbergen harder than anyone else in the garage: the "win and you're in" rule was gone. A regular season win no longer guarantees a playoff spot. Qualification is strictly based on the point standings now. NASCAR didn't just delete that rule and walk away, though, they rebalanced the scoring around it. Race winners now collect 55 points, up 15 from the old system. Second place still pays 35, third pays 34, and stage points are unchanged at 10-9-8 for the top 3. But bankable playoff points are completely gone. Points reset for the chase field, with a 25-point bonus for the regular season champion, and the seeding cascades down from 2,100 points for the top seed to 2,000 points for the 16th and final seed. NASCAR framed it as a way to make every single race matter more while still rewarding wins, just not as an automatic ticket in. For most of the garage, that's a philosophical shift. For the number 97 Trackhouse Chevrolet, it was a direct hit to the entire business plan. Van Gisbergen didn't try to spin it. "I guess initially I was brought over here for that win and you're in to guarantee a spot in the playoffs," he said. "So yeah, I certainly knew I had to get better at ovals, and I think we've done that. There's a detail in here that a lot of people miss. Back in 2024, while running a full second-tier schedule, he called that format the most overcomplicated racing series he'd ever been part of, and admitted he'd spent an entire night just trying to figure out how it worked. NASCAR then simplified everything for 2026, and that simplified version happened to strip out the exact safety net that had been protecting him. So the response started before the rule change even officially hit the track. Through the spring of 2026, his oval results quietly started climbing. He said his biggest hurdle is simply getting up to race speed fast once the truck rolls off the hauler. At Charlotte's 600-mile race, he actually ran 7th fastest among 39 cars and had an average running position inside the top 8, but a slow pit stop dropped him to 11th at the checkered flag. His teammate Ross Chastain, a 5-time oval winner, put it bluntly: he's a racer who puts the tire to the limit, and now he's actually finding that limit on the big tracks too. Then the results started showing up on the scoreboard. Nashville Superspeedway in late May, 5th place, leading 12 laps, a new career best on an oval. Echo Park Speedway in July, 6th on a drafting track. And then North Wilkesboro on July 20th, the moment that really got people's attention. He started 8th in a 37-car field, but a gutsy two-tire call from crew chief Stephen Doran vaulted him to 4th. By lap 52 he'd passed Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs, and points leader Denny Hamlin to actually take the lead, and the radio line that came out of that moment, something along the lines of, "I'm leading, what do I do now?" spread across the sport within minutes. He led 4 different times for 49 laps that night, second only to race winner Joey Logano, and finished 5th for his best ever short track result. Put a number on all of that improvement and it's genuinely stark. Through the middle of 2026, Van Gisbergen had 7 finishes of 11th or better in 17 non-road course starts, an average finish around 19.3, and a driver rating just a few points off the series average. He's gone from being a significantly below-average oval driver to essentially a dead-average one in less than a full season. And that improvement isn't spread evenly. On short tracks and drafting tracks he's now comfortably above average, but on the intermediate mile-and-a-half tracks that make up most of the schedule, he's still lagging, with an average finish over 21 and a driver rating in the high 50s. Here's the part that makes this genuinely rare in NASCAR history. Looking at every driver whose career started after 1972, and setting the bar at real road course dominance paired with genuinely poor results everywhere else, only 2 drivers had ever turned that around across a comparable stretch of non-road course races. Jerry Nadeau did it around 2000 and 2001, and Robbie Gordon did it around 2001 and 2002. Van Gisbergen, across 2025 into 2026, is the 3rd name to ever join that list. By driver rating specifically, the entire historical comparison group is just 3 names: Michael McDowell, Robbie Gordon, and Shane Van Gisbergen. He's got his own theory for why the short tracks clicked first. He believes those tracks reward the exact skills he already had: brake bias, gear selection, finding different lines, the stuff a driver can manipulate himself. On the bigger, faster ovals, he says a driver is mostly at the mercy of whatever the car gives him, and he's openly admitted he still doesn't fully know how to describe to his engineer what he wants the car to do at those places. Tellingly, when asked which races he'd choose to run outside the Cup Series if he had a free pick, he didn't pick the road courses he already dominates. He named Bristol and Iowa, saying flat out that he needed to work on his weaknesses. It's worth sitting with how unusual that answer really is. Most drivers, given the choice, would go run more of whatever they're already great at. Van Gisbergen went the other direction, essentially volunteering for more reps at the tracks that expose his biggest weakness. That's not just a driver chasing point security, that sounds like someone actively trying to rebuild his own skill set in public, on national television, with a playoff spot hanging in the balance. Which brings us to Richmond, on August 14th and 15th, 2026, and to an answer he gave that basically contradicts itself in real time. Asked how the new points format had changed his driving, he first pushed back, "I don't think my mindset has changed." Then, in the very same breath, he admitted the opposite, that these past couple of races, he's been points racing a little bit, even though the rest of the year he's just driving flat out. He wrapped it up with his own justification for resisting the idea entirely: "I think that when you're not driving naturally, you find yourself in trouble." That tension is exactly the pressure he's under. Without the old safety net, he knows he needs a strong close to the regular season. He arrived at Richmond just 47 points above the cutline with 3 races left, coming off a rough weekend at Iowa, a track that's given him trouble going back to his lower series days. His read on it was blunt: "We can't afford to have another bad race." He also admitted he's now watching individual competitors, keeping an eye on the 3 or 4 drivers closest to him in the standings. Richmond weekend then delivered something that had never happened in his career before. He won the pole for the Truck Series race, his first career pole at an oval in any of NASCAR's national divisions, putting down a lap just 0.014 seconds ahead of Caden Honeycutt. It was the 13th pole of his NASCAR career and only his 5th Truck Series start, and it puts him alongside Daniel Suarez and Marcos Ambrose as one of only a handful of foreign-born drivers to grab a pole in all 3 of NASCAR's national touring divisions. Weather pushed that race to Saturday, and he recovered from a mid-race pit road penalty to finish 4th. Then came the Cup race, and the 4 contradictory facts from the top of the story all played out at once. He started outside the top 30. Austin Cindric had his best run of the season and jumped ahead of him in points, shoving Van Gisbergen down to exactly 16th, the last spot inside the cutline. That result came down to a strategy gamble from crew chief Stephen Doran, who kept the car out on older tires at the start of the final stage to grab the wave around and slot inside the top 15 off sequence. The caution he needed didn't come right away, but it landed just as he'd cycled back inside the top 15, and he held that track position the rest of the way to finish 14th, matching his Richmond result from a year earlier. Because of how this scoring format works, 1 point per position with no stage points scored that stretch, he outscored the driver right behind him by just 3 points and pushed his cushion from 47 up to 50. He's still within reach of the drivers ahead of him too, 7 points behind Cindric, 20 behind Bubba Wallace. His explanation for the whole night traced straight back to the truck race. The driving line that worked in the truck series worked again in the Cup car once the tires wore in, and clean air up front made the difference. Only 2 races are left before the chase field locks in, New Hampshire Motor Speedway and Daytona International Speedway, before the postseason opens at Darlington on Labor Day weekend. Van Gisbergen has described New Hampshire as a flat oval with long straights and tight corners, a layout where cornering technique borrows a lot from road racing, the same theory that's already produced his best short track runs. Daytona is the wild card. He said the mix of the new format, no practice sessions, and a tight points battle is going to force drivers to choose between chasing stage points and just protecting their equipment, and he's honest that he doesn't know how that's going to shake out. There are really 2 ways this goes from here. In one version, Van Gisbergen locks into the chase with road course wins still on the table across that 10-race stretch, and an oval performance that's no longer a liability, which would make him the only driver in the field who can genuinely win from anywhere on both road courses and ovals. In the other version, the points management continues, the same aggression that produced 6 road course wins in 12 starts gets dialed back, and he ends the regular season without the consistency to hold on to 16th or the raw speed to win at Daytona. Either way, NASCAR's greatest road course specialist is turning into a far more complete racer than anyone expected, and now it's everyone else in the field who has to worry about what that improvement does to them. So here's the real question heading into these last 2 weekends. It was never really about whether Shane Van Gisbergen could drive an oval. It's whether the guy who insists he's never really points raced can keep doing exactly that for 2 more races in a row. 2 races. 50 points. And a driver who built his entire reputation on being unbeatable in one specific setting now has to prove he can be merely solid everywhere else, for 2 more Saturdays, without losing what made him special in the first place. That's the story worth watching as the regular season winds down. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, and subscribe for more NASCAR news, analysis, and fan discussion every week.